I'm very happy to have you here this evening virtually at the Faculty of Architecture and Design here in Bratislava. Welcome.
Thank you.
Immediately at the beginning, I would like to say that this project, like Reflections on Architecture with Norwegian architects, was enabled through or was supported by the project Empathy in Art, which is supported by the Iceland, Liechtenstein, and Norway through the EEA Grants. Secondly, I would like to underline the fact that we are very, very happy to have you here, because you are actually the only woman we succeeded to have in this year, which is, well, I'm so happy about this. And I want to say to our dear students that you are actually a colleague of mine, because you are working as a professor at the Oslo School of Architecture, and parallelly you are architect, actually one of the creators of the architectural office manthey and kula that you have established together with your colleague Per Thompson in year 2004, if I'm correct.
That's right.
I have already introduced you very briefly in our introductory lecture, but I would like to stress once again that we are very, very happy to have your office represented here in our series, because, I mean, you are one of the most important architectural studios in Norway that was nominated several times for Miss van der Rohe Award for European Architecture. You are right now finishing quite a lot of important projects. I don't want to talk longer about this because this will be your business right now. So I only wanted to remind our students whom we have here today, and that I'm very, very happy about this. So now I would leave floor to you, Beate, and please you can start with your presentation. Once again,
thank you. Thank you for the nice introduction. If I make my, let's see here. If I do like this, can you see the front page of the
yes,
the
yes,
first slide now? Yes. So then I will start. I can say a few words about the office. Every time I speak, people ask me why the office is called manthey kula, and just to tell you why, it is because my middle name is Manthey and Kula is my partner's family name. So we enjoyed or liked very much having a name that didn't ring a bell to anyone. It's sort of nice with this sort of anonymous office name. But anyway, we are a small office. We are 5 people. We have been small ever since we started. We work with different kinds of projects, mostly public commissions. People say that what we do is sort of in the border line between architecture, landscape architecture, and art. I would say that it's all architecture. We work like most architects do, with models, drawings, illustrations, diagrams, whatever. We are quite hands-on. And one thing that makes us a bit different from other firms is that quite regularly we initiate our own projects. That means what I call paper projects, projects that are not meant to be built, but that are investigations into topics that interest us. These projects are shown on exhibitions, they are bought by museums or by architecture collections. So they are, to us, very serious and important works. And in almost every lecture I give, I always show some of that work, and I will do that today as well. But mostly I will talk about built projects. And I will start with, it's sort of chronological. I will start with not the first project we built, but one of the first projects we built. I can say as a sort of general comment that we have never had we have had some big commissions, but never big buildings. So all our projects are quite small and possibly to handle in a way where we can have quite good control over the result. So the first project is a small restroom up in Lofoten Islands. You maybe recognize the map of Norway with all the fjords and the ocean. In Norway, there has been this project or institution led by the road ministry, which is called National Tourist Routes. Some architects have been chosen to design small or large projects along the most beautiful roads in Norway to sort of enhance tourism. So this is one of those projects. The climate and landscape up north is quite stunning. The sea is right in front of you, and the meeting between the land and the sea is very, very sudden. In this landscape, the road sort of meanders along the coast, and on one of these, this road, there used to be a little lookout point where there was a public toilet. And during a storm, the whole building was blown away, and we were asked to design a new toilet building. And the only requirement was that it had to be heavy so that it wouldn't blow away. So we had this idea of a quite closed building. The point of this was that when you had to go inside, you should sort of leave the landscape behind. We wanted to create small rooms that gave you a different sort of sensual experience than the natural one. We started out, as you probably saw in the sketch, with a concrete building. Then we found out that there were lots of shipyards nearby, or sort of in the towns nearby the site. And we thought that we should rather make it locally and have it produced by a local shipyard, more or less like a boat structure. So we developed the concept and came up with the idea of a sort of steel structure clad in corten steel. It's an incredibly simple plan. It's a large toilet for handicapped people. It's a small service room and a smaller toilet. And as you can see, there's a skylight and a very high set window. Then we started to look into the steel structure and understood that actually we didn't need an interior skin. We could work with a load-bearing skin of 8 and 10 millimeter steel and only have some bracing where it was needed. This is a building which is closed during the winter, so it really didn't need anything else but this thin steel structure. So it was made in the shipyard. Every piece was made and then it was brought to the site and welded together. We enjoyed very much working on the detail of this project. For instance, the openings. Of course, these openings could be rectangular. We needed a sort of a flange to lay the glass on, but we really wanted to to form the opening so that they weren't regular windows. So we started to sort of modulate the steel into something a little bit different than the most obvious shapes. We designed the doors, the hinges, literally everything. And the building is, as I said, in Corten. That is because there's so much salt in the air close to the sea. So whatever material it was, it would start to rust. But with Corten, you get this sacrificial layer of rust that sort of protects the rest of the building. And then the elements that you got in touch with, for instance, the doors were made in stainless steel. Here you see it in the landscape. I will go a bit fast through some of these images. And here you look sort of in through the large glass. I think we are an office that is very interested in details, but we are not interested in slick details. We like very much that you can see how things are produced and that you can read from the building what the different parts or elements, architectural elements actually do. In the middle of the building, there are two sort of concrete walls that stabilize the structure sideways, and that is used for hanging all the equipment. This is the small toilet room. We lined the space with clear glass so that when you were inside this building, you wouldn't get stains from the rust onto your clothes. So this clear glass is sort of a lining. Then we also saw that if you were sitting down in this space and you looked straight up, if there was some glass up here, you would actually also see the horizon. So this glass became important in very many ways, both as a sort of framing the notes the welders had written to each other, but also to actually, inside this very close space, give an impression of the horizon outside. Another project, quite different, but also a sort of project that is for the road ministry. This is a ferry stop. As you can see, the traveling by car along the coast is a very tedious affair. You have to use a lot of ferries to get across from one part of the land to the other. And especially during the summer months, when there's lots of tourists here, you spend a lot of time waiting for ferries. So this was it's actually the smallest municipality in Norway, and it could only be reached by ferry. There's no road going directly here, and the ferry used to land on this dock. And then the cars grew in numbers, and the ferries, the boats got bigger, and this dock sort of ceased to function. It was actually too small for the boats. So the municipalities decided to move the ferry station from this side of a small bay over to this side, which was a quite beautiful sort of promontory from where you could, of course, see these existing buildings. Here is the plan that the road ministry made. Actually, this building that I showed in the former picture, that is a small hotel and a small restaurant and cafe. And they were, of course, quite dependent on getting guests from the ferry. So they were very worried that when the ferry stop moved to the other side of the bay, maybe they would lose their customers. And then we got quite worried when we saw this plan made by the road people, because it really ruined quite a lot of the coastal terrain. It was a very large parking space and ditches and landfills, and they blasted away some of the site here in order to make space for a little service building. And initially we were asked to design this service building, but then we said that we need to make a better site plan which takes more care of the terrain. So we developed a different plan which was quite a bit narrower than the original plan, and which included less dynamite, less blasting, so we managed to sort of secure some of this coastline, and also we moved the service building down to the very end of the parking space. What I will show now is this small building which is here. We had this idea that the building could do many things. It should contain the sort of spatial program was simple. It should contain a kiosk and a waiting room and toilets, and also it should have some covered outdoor area for those who were waiting for the boat. And then this was of course a very big contract for the entrepreneur, but the main contract, which was really about groundwork, it was how those who got the job were used to building roads and traffic systems. They had never built a building before, and we thought that it was important to design a building that was mostly prefabricated and only mounted together on site. That would make it easier for the contractors. So we decided to make a building that had some criteria. It should be prefabricated. It should work almost as a spoiler, almost as a gate that you could look through over to the cafe building on the other side of the bay. And also it should somehow be relevant on the site. We had this vague idea that the structure could evoke ideas of the sea. So we designed a building that had two on-site, two parts of the structure that was cast on site, the two sort of gable walls, these two, one quite straight wall and one which we gave a bit more mass in order to stabilize the structure. And then onto these two walls, we made a sort of inverted steel vault that could span from one wall to the other and cantilever out to create a covered area. So the main structure was sort of this steel vault, also very thin, 10 millimeters thin, that supported the building which was underneath and sort of created a characteristic form. Here's a model of the building. It became important to us that the building was transparent, so that you could see through it, not only across the bay, but also onto every part of the building. We were quite fascinated by this large belly that sort of was hanging over every room, and we wanted it to be seen from every room. And then we, so very much of the project had to do with solving the details for making a transparent building. What the vault did was also to stabilize a quite slender wooden structure underneath that was then covered in glass, in insulated glass, so that these spaces underneath were warm spaces throughout the year. So here's an image of the final project. You can see that this idea of looking through or seeing everything and sort of reflecting the site sort of is a strong characteristic of the building. And then we also used this vault as a sort of armature that reflected the light during the long dark nights that sort of are characteristic for the northern part of Norway. And then the last sort of road project that I will show, also up in the north. I mean, Oslo is down here, so this is really quite far north. This is also a rest area. Here you see the road. The toilet building that I showed you in the beginning is way out here. So this is more the beginning of the road. There was a big sort of landfill, sort of waste material from the road construction, and on top of that landfill there was an old rest area. It was in quite bad shape, and we were asked to transform it. So here you see a small model of the site. What we suggested was to make a platform from where you could look onto the large sound that was here, and where you could also sit down and drink your coffee or eat your meal. And then it was sheltered from the road by this planted area. Here you see the plan of the site. Originally, it had a very large traffic area, so this plan was very much about also reducing the traffic area and making it very clear where one was supposed to spend time. What you see here, what is white is actually asphalt, and what is black is either steel or concrete. So here you see the foundations of what became the most important part of the project, and that was the furniture, where you were going to sit down and drink your coffee. You recognize the form of the platform, so these are concrete foundations for different kinds of furniture. I will get back to that. We spent some time developing this furniture. It was important for us that it could be made from standard flat steel that just could be formed and given different shapes. And it was also important to us that the furniture and the railing, which was necessary for preventing people from falling down into the water, the furniture and the railing should be one constructive system. So that meant that one couldn't remove the furniture without sort of reducing the capacity of the railing, and vice versa. So we developed several of these forms that were both benches and tables. And then we started to work with the sort of how these pieces of furniture could be given character, and how they could be covered with something that was not steel, because steel is of course quite cold to sit on. So we had this idea of making these steel troughs that could be filled with polyurethane, and then given different colors. And we started to look at the structure and this relationship between the railing and the furniture, and decided that each furniture should only have 2 legs, and then the last leg should be in the railing. So this is a small table, 2 legs and the last one. A large bank, 2 legs and the last one. And And then we started to draw lines between the legs or the constructive parts, and we started to see a very sort of interesting pattern emerging, being developed between the sort of the relationship between the straight triangular lines between the supportive legs and the curved form of the furniture pieces. So we started to we made these models of these forms, spent some time choosing colors. So this is the sort of semaphore colors, these colors that are used in a marine signal system. And then, so here are I think it's 32 different benches and tables that have these patterns in these colors, and it all is generated from this idea of the relationship between the structure of the railing and the structure of the tables. So here are the steel troughs, galvanized steel troughs that are filled with this quite beautiful polyurethane, which is very reflective. Here you see the site when they are established. It was quite nice to see how this reflective surface sort of became a mirror for the sky. There's lots of wind up there, so the sky is moving a lot, and these shiny surfaces sort of change character all the time. And then it's, yeah, here you see how it ended up. Then I wanted to, I told you initially that I wanted to show you a paper project. This is, we were invited by a sort of architectural institution, sort of museum in Orléans in France. They have a large exhibition or a large collection of experimental architecture, and they were having a biennale, and we were asked to contribute with a project. We didn't get any so much sort of constraints or any program from them, except that the name of the biennale was Walking Through Someone Else's Dream, and we thought that was a quite evocative title, and decided that we want to make a series of projects based on that title. And then we started to look for, or started to think about, whose dream are we walking through? It's a very, very open task. And when we work, whether it is a commission or a paper project, we always start with setting some rules for ourselves, or some limits or constraints, you could call it, some sort of resistance that can help giving form to the project. For instance, in the last project, it was this constructive relationship between the bench and the railing, which sort of created the character of the project. So here we started to look for protagonists, people that had lived before us, that we could suspect were dreaming, and we said to ourselves that dreams maybe it is so that dreams are especially important when you are isolated, because then the dreams sort of represent the only other impulse than yourself. So we started to look for people who had been isolated throughout history. And in order to make it even more sort of isolated, we said we want to find characters that have been isolated on islands, because islands are, to begin with, quite isolated. And we started to search on the net. And then we came up with 5 characters that we found interesting. The first one was an Icelandic who lived in the 10th century. Do you say that? Yes. Grete Osmundsen. He was an arson. He had put fire to a farm and was outlawed and fled to a small island outside Iceland, where he lived for 5 years until he was found by other people and was killed. That was the sort of Icelandic rule that if you were outlawed, anyone could kill you. Then it was Juan Amarilla, a Native American, who was part of this San Nicolas tribe on an island outside California. In the late 1800s, her tribe was collected and brought to the mainland by missionaries, but for some reason she was forgotten. She was not found, or she was left on the island, and she lived alone on this island for more than 20 years, or maybe about 20 years, before she also was found, brought to the mainland, and died after only a few weeks. Then it was Piotr Kamishevsky. He was a Cossack and a diplomat, a general, warrior. Then he fell out with the Russian empress and was brought to Siberia, to this prison island, Solovets Island, in the north of Russia. And he was imprisoned and stayed on alone in isolation in prison there for almost 30 years. Then it was Mary Marlon, an Irish cook who worked in New York. She was the carrier of typhoid fever. She was never sick herself, but some of the people eating her food got sick and some people died. So she was interned in North Brother Island. I think it's in the Hudson River, where she stayed on in 2 periods until she died of pneumonia. And then it was a Dutch sailor, Leendert Hassenbosch. He was a homosexual working on a ship passing the Atlantic. And in the middle of the Atlantic, he was discovered as being homosexual and set ashore on this Ascension Island, which is extremely isolated and there's no people living there. So he lived on for only 5 months and then he died. But he kept a diary that was found by British sailors almost 100 years later. So based on these 5 people's stories, we wanted to develop sort of ideas of space. In order to give ourselves even more rules, we said that each space should be developed from a sort of a site or from a foundation, and that this site, this model, should be made of some oak material that was given to us. So we made these 5 different sort of bases or sites for the models. And we said that each of these sites should measure 1 unit of a measuring system that was existing in the land of each protagonist. And then we decided that each architectural idea should be developed on 1 sheet of paper. So I'll go quickly through these 5 small projects. This is the first Icelandic one, building from G, and we believed that he must have been dreaming of fear and of freedom, and he must have had a sort of a need to be in control. So we had this idea about a centralized space with sort of 4 lookout platforms and a very sheltered space in the middle. And from this space, there were four escape routes in the 4 cardinal directions. So here is the site, 1 alin, old Icelandic measurement. The model, the sort of base of the model, where you see the escape routes and the platforms and this sheltered space in the middle, and then these sort of covered platforms. Then it's building from M, the Irish cook. She was never sick herself, so she must have been dreaming of sort of normality. And we guessed that she must have had a sort of concern about surface, because one could not see that she was a carrier of a deadly disease. So we had this idea of a structure which was all about establishing a horizontal plane on a tilted site. I will not go very much into each project. There's no time for that. But here we also started to work with color in order to think about surface appearance. So this is the site, 1 Irish saying. Here are the internal structural walls with these color patterns. The model in plan. And where it's the whole sort of idea of the structure is what is needed in order to establish this normal floor or horizontal floor on this tilted surface. Then it was building from P, Piotr Kamishevsky. We knew about him that when he was released, I think he was more than 90 years old, at least he was very, very old. He decided to stay on in the cell and stayed on for 5 years until he died there. He had become a very sort of religious man, and we believed that he must have dreamt of friction, and also he must have had a feeling of gratefulness. Friction coming from his former life, where he was both a diplomat and a warrior. So we developed this space, which is sort of a result of 2 external forces. And then we developed a sort of timber structure that defines this space. Which is somehow intricate with quite dense columns, and as you can see, I don't know what that word is in English. Half of the columns are removed in order to make wider entrance or openings, so that you actually can pass through this very tight space in the middle. So this is the site for building from P, 1 archen, formal measurement. There are the columns, the structure, and this internal space being about friction. Then it was building from J, the Native American. We think there must have been dreams of inclusion and persistence. Here, the idea was to create a structure that consisted of several spaces, based on the idea that somehow the building itself could be a comfort to someone who was missing the company of the rest of the tribe. The site measuring 1 cubic squared, some images, and then this very simple geometric structure, which somehow creates a quite complex spatiality inside. And then the last one, building from L, the Dutch sailor. And we believe there must have been dreams of acceptance, sort of understanding his situation and the yearning to surrender. The site, we never decided whether this was on land or in the water. The project is a large circular space from where you can look out in all directions. You enter the space by climbing up one of the legs, and then you can continue up towards the roof. This is a model photo from the interior of the space, seeing the sort of ladder coming up and the ladder continuing up towards the roof. The roof is a large translucent membrane, and the idea is that you can walk out onto this soft membrane and end there. Okay, back to reality. This is a house which just was finished this summer. It's not in Norway, it's in Sweden, little ways outside the Norwegian border. It is a large natural site, quite beautiful site like this, with a lot of visible bedrock. So many people would probably say that it's not a very pleasant or sort of inviting site. We think that it's absolutely beautiful, but it's hard to move around from floor to floor. These bedrock plateaus make quite beautiful or quite usable outdoor floors, but it's hard to walk from one place to another. So we decided that the best thing here would be to build a building that spans from one plateau to another plateau and maybe connects these parts of the site. And by doing that, by building a bridge, sort of a bridge building, one could also have a construction site without ruining any of the existing terrain. The normal thing to do, maybe where you are, but at least where I am, is to move in with dynamite or landfills or large machines that result in very big changes in existing qualities. We tend to think that when you have a commission, the site is maybe the most important resource you have to deal with. More important than the client's budgets or the program or anything is really the existing conditions and how we as architects manage to make use of and enhance these qualities that are important for the result. So we had an idea of a bridge. It's difficult to build something without changing or without normalizing or regulating existing terrain, because it's of course non-Euclidean geometry. So we spent a lot of time with surveyors measuring the points where the bridge could land. We understood early that it had to be a timber structure because timber was the only thing which was light enough to being carried or transported to the site. The span is 29.7 meters, so it's a quite long span. And here are the two bridges that sort of carry the whole house. Each of the 4 foot points are different, and the whole point with the surveyor was, of course, to get complete control over these points. What we started with was, after having control, was to drill holes in the existing granite, and then holes that were made specifically for each of these 4 stainless steel brackets that were to be bolted onto the terrain. And in order to do this right, we had to test with more sort of handy material with wood, just to make sure that we had complete control over these 4 points. Because when these archers were coming, they were being transported in by helicopter. They had to be lifted down onto these brackets, and the fit had to be perfect. There was no possibility to really change anything when this was going to happen. So here is the section of the house where you see the house, and you see the arch that runs through the house and how it lands on these 4 points. Looking the other way, the cross section is very simple. The regulations demanded a saddle roof of 30 degrees. So this is a very long and narrow building. Here you see the transport of each arch came in 2 parts, and each part fitted quite well onto the brackets. You see the underside of the building. The structure is then such that there are hanging pillars mounted on the outside of each arch, and then these trusses are sort of spanning between each pillar, creating this sort of keel-like underside of the house. And here's another cross section where you see also the sort of bracing of the structure. It's of course lots of wind loads here, so the building had to be connected to the rock in the back in order to take both suction forces and pressure. Here you see the plan of the building. It's a very long interior space, 25 meters, with a central dining area and a living room and 4 bedrooms, and then these connections to the different parts of the site. It's hard to build in the air. It's really the most logical thing is always to make a foundation and build upwards from there. Building something that's actually hanging in the air is more challenging, and especially when it comes to stabilization. So this solution required some interesting geometries that again made some interesting details when it came to the sort of more both building physics and static solutions. So here's the space is starting to get finished. Looking through the bedrooms, there's 12 sliding doors, sort of creating different sort of flexibility within the building. Looking from one of the bedrooms out into the dining area. Here you see the finished house and how it's really resting in the terrain without leaving any trace or any sort of changes in the existing terrain. See underneath it, see the back, the interior, bathrooms, interior. We enjoy very much this presence of the structure inside, that these arches, which are sort of the whole structural and sort of conceptual idea of the building, is present in every room. Then to the last project. It is not finished yet. It's an ongoing project. It's a public commission for a national memorial at a place called Utøyakaia. I don't know if you know about this incident. 10 years ago, there was a Norwegian right-wing extremist that a nice summer day, the 22nd of July, blew up the government building in Oslo, killing 8 people and making tremendous damage in the center of Oslo. And then he dressed up as a policeman and drove out to this island, which is owned by the Norwegian Youth Labour Party. There was a summer camp. Several hundred kids were having political summer camp here. And dressed as a policeman, he went around and executed 69 kids. We got the commission to make a sort of memorial of this incident. And the place where the memorial was going to be was on the mainland, from where the terrorists sort of left on the ferry to get out to the island, and from where every person visiting the island sort of leaves the mainland. So the site for the memorial is here. This is an aerial photo of what the site looked like 10 years ago. Now it is quite changed because they have sort of rebuilt the facilities out on the island. Our challenge was, well, there were many challenges. One of them was how to make a memorial of such a terrible story, sort of right next to this quite rough road. How to connect somehow, how to make a memorial that had the connection to the story itself. It's a special area. It's an area where the neighbors do not want to be reminded of the incident. It's it's an area where the neighbors are not so fond of the political activities out on the island. One of the things that causes irritation is that buses transporting kids to the island stop up at the road here and block the road for the people living there. So one of our first sketches was this, to make a new entrance road, which would take you down to the level of the water in this end of the site, so that the end where the memorial was going to be could be much calmer and somehow be the last moment on the site. So if you were not going to the memorial, you could leave to the island. But if you were going to the memorial, you would sort of be at the very end of the site. We decided early that we wanted to come up with a form that would not have existed if it was not for this terror incident. And we started to look at the timeline and sort of looking into the narrative. The site is here. It's quite beautifully positioned. The island is right west of the site, and when the sun moves every day, it moves sort of from here and around like this. So this is a warm and sheltered place. And then we started to look at where the sun would be at the sort of strategic moment of the historic incident. And at 1525, when the government quarters exploded, the sun is here. At 1721, when the terrorist shot his first victim right here, the sun is in this position. And then at 1833, when the terrorist was captured, the sun is right west. And then we thought that with these directions we can make a form. And we decided also that we want all the 77 victims to be sort of to have a physical manifestation on the site. So then we looked at these directions and geometries and started to develop forms that somehow related to this schedule in a way. We needed a long line because we wanted to line up 77 columns, one column for each victim. And since the site was quite small, we had to compress the line, and these are studies of how this line of columns could be compressed. So we ended up with this shape, creating one small space here, which sort of when you are in this space, at the moment the government quarters were bombed, there will be no shadow from the columns in this space. And likewise, when you are in this space, there will be no shadows from the columns during the time the killings went on the island. Then, so you see these little dots are the columns. So they are resting on a sort of a stair, a stone stair, that also works as a retaining wall, because we made the whole site into a large ramp so that everyone entering the site could easily come down to the water. And then we let the stair go out into the water and create a sort of a dock out in the water as a gesture to the locals who had boats and were very important during the rescue operation. It is a large project. Here you see the road, the new entranceway. It's 15 meters height difference from here and down to the water. So this is a very large concrete structure. Then there's place for buses, there's place for many cars, there's technical rooms under the road, there's a dock for the island and a roof structure where you can wait for the boat, and then there is the memorial and the dock leading out to the water. So this is the building site, what it looked like last week. It's really sort of building from right from one edge of the site to the other. It's really completely filling the site. There is some sheltered natural terrain, this promontory, which is going to be kept as it was. There's lots of challenging terrain. It's very deep down to bedrock in this end and right on bedrock in this end. This is drinking water, so the sort of building process here needs to be monitored in every way. But what I will say a little bit more about is the most important thing of this project, and that is the development of the columns. They are cast in solid bronze. To begin with, we worked together with a sort of a factory which makes propellers for large ships on the western coast of Norway, and they helped us to develop models in 1 to 10. We wanted each column to be different, and we're quite worried how to make 77 different forms for casting that were big and expensive. So we wanted this sort of industrial process for the bronze work. However, we ended up working with a foundry in southern Germany. So this is the casting of one of the columns. They are all different, but they are sort of the same family. They all have this sort of twist that makes the top of the column reflect the sun as it moves past the site. What we think is fantastic with this bronze process is that it's a mixture between sort of 3D modeling in machines and then heavy industry in the casting process, and then very, very fine craftsmanship when it comes to the finalization of each column. The most important part is the names, each name of each victim that is being cast into the columns. We didn't want the names to be written with a regular alphabet. It would become too much of a sort of a name tag. So we developed these names, each name as a small project, being made of tilted surfaces that would reflect the light as sort of the sun moved across the site. So this is from the building process. This is actually early last week, where the columns have arrived on the site. Here they are. Well, it's sort of hard to see. They are lifting down some of the first columns. They are being placed here. You see the names. 2 of the families do not want their kids' names on the columns, so they are blank. I think this is the last picture. And what I appreciate most, I think, about this project is the care and time and architectural work that has actually gone into each of these victims' names. Yeah, that was it.
Beate, thank you very much for your very impressive presentation, lecture, and finally this last project, which is a very a moving one, when I can put it like this. I will now give floor to our students to ask you some questions, but I would like to start with one observation or a question. You do a lot of experimenting and prototyping during your work because each of the work you have shown us is very site-specific, I would say. So do you sometimes have a kind of occasion to use these, to repeat some of the solutions, or they are really like only for this one very specific situation? Because this is really amazing amount of work.
I don't think we ever repeat anything, but we develop ideas. For instance, an easy example, but for instance, when we started to work with these colors on the tables of the rest stop, that was sort of led into the walls of the building from M, and that again led to an idea which we have not yet carried out for the walls of the bridge house. So I think that ideas stay with us, but they are never used exactly. They are never repeated, but they are part of an approach, I guess, to every new project. Yes. And what is also important is exactly this, that these paper projects we do, I think they are very much about formal exercises, so which are then brought into the to the commissions.
Yeah, exactly. This would be my second observation, that it looks like that you are testing some of these ideas in your paperwork.
Yeah, absolutely.
This is really amazing. And one more observation, we just discussed during your speech that your houses for these isolated persons, that they reminded us of the work of John Hayduk. How he was, and so how is your relation to this discussion of
It's very personal, because I spent a short time studying at Cooper Union, and I was placed in his thesis class, so he was my teacher for a while, and also after I had finished my diploma in Norway, I returned to New York and worked with Raymond Abraham, who also is, of course, so I am convinced that I am strongly influenced by the tradition of sort of paper architecture from that time.
Yeah, beautiful, because even this difficult destiny of those isolated persons, because I don't know if you know the work of John Hayduk, which is situated on Prague Castle. This house for suicide and his mother, which is also with this very tragical content. So
I think I think these paperworks are these and others, but they are very important to us. And for instance, this memorial, I think we would not have even gotten the commission or been able to work with it if it had not been for these studies of emotions that we have worked with in the paperworks. So we are certainly interested in the sort of emotional aspects of architecture.
Absolutely. Now I perhaps give floor to others that could ask. Oh yes, we have here Cornelius, our colleague, a PhD student actually from South Africa. Yeah, and he has some questions for you.
Thank you very much. It was a very interesting presentation. I actually have two questions for you. I don't know which one to ask first, so I'll start with one that I really want to know. Which project that you enjoy working on most, and in the sense of which project challenged your approach to architecture? Which one do you think would actually sort of inspire or change your approach to design moving forward?
That's a difficult question, and I'm not sure I can answer it, because first of all, when you are in the middle of a project, you are completely immersed in it, and that specific project is the most important. And maybe I am not sure I was clear about it, but we often set up these constraints for ourselves, and these constraints are very often making it difficult for us. For instance, this ferry stop, that it should be translucent, it should be possible to see everything. It's actually really hard to do. And building this bridge up in these cliffs is also very hard to do. and this massive building site in a hostile neighborhood with heavy machinery and no, I mean, it's just very hard to do almost everything. But we like that. We like it a lot to challenge ourselves, and I don't think I can say that one project is more important than the other. We are very happy about the house, because we have done, as I showed you, we have done projects that are not buildings. They are more installations or infrastructural projects, and so that one is important because it's sort of a normal house. The memorial is important because it's so important to so many people, all the victims' families and the survivors and all that. It's of course tremendously important, and no, I think they are all important in different ways.
Okay, thank you for that. And my second question was actually, it refers to your use of models in the design process. I understand, obviously, you, as Prof. mentioned, these projects are site-specific. But when you start with these models, do you go through numerous models that you would build, or do you have an almost final form in mind, and then you work towards that? Or what is your approach for that?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think what you saw now is mostly sort of finished models. For instance, the Archipelago project, there the model was sort of the final result. But then there were small sketch models, and for all the other projects, there has also been simple sketch models that are being transformed during the process. Yes, so that is important, but we also we like very much to nice things. So a nice model is a very nice thing.
Thank you for that.
Yes, we have we are here a kind of board of questioning people. So Monica, my colleague, will now have another question for you.
Yeah, there are plenty of us in this room. I don't really know how to put this question, but because your lecture, your presentation was full of very deep ideas on how you find the final form. Like you always start with like very, deep research, and I understand that you want to give answers to yourself about how to shape the architecture. I was just wondering, like when you were explaining us all the very, very detailed concepts, then how much can actually people visiting this place comprehend from it, like without knowing all the complicated backstory that. If you could talk about that, like how much does the regular visitor get from it? Because there's so much.
I don't think they need to know anything, and that's important because these narratives or the sort of formal logic that goes into the project that we need to decide on design, that is important for us in order to create the logic, in a way, a consistency in the form. But it's very important to us that is not a necessary part for the project. For instance, this memorial, we do not want to say anything about that in the final project. We hope that people will play and swim and do whatever in this place, because I think that's when I talk about this project, it's easy to talk about our reflections of the process, but I think it's very important that when the projects leave us, they are open for interpretation, and people can understand them exactly the way they want. That is very important.
So you have your logic behind what you've done, but what you leave is, as you said, free for interpretation.
It's open. Yeah, we say stop now. It's to you. But hopefully there will be, for instance, in these letters at the memorial, we hope that some sort of care will be understood. That there is a sense of care in the design, but they don't have to know anything about light or sun or hours or schedules or anything. Yeah.
Thank you. I was thinking about this a lot while we were speaking, and maybe another thing that would interest me about the project of the sort of levitating bridge house, because that was a private thing to build. Like, how did you explain to the client the whole idea? Like, was it difficult to sort of persuade them to go into such a courageous project, or?
We are the clients ourselves, so it is very
Well, that explains a lot, because we were talking like in between us that this could never be built in Slovakia. Like nobody would find the sponsor for such a thing.
But you know, I think nowadays we had to apply for, of course, the municipalities to in order to build it, etc. And there is a general concern about landscape preservation or some sort of sustainable or ecological approach to nature that actually makes such ideas very, very easy to argue for. So in that sense, I think it wasn't difficult to argue towards the municipality or the building authorities, for instance, because it's so clear that such an approach leaves no impact on the site. So that was easy.
Yeah, I would love to see more projects like this in the future, like with this kind of logic, like leaving no footprint actually. Like
no footprint. I mean, the footprint is less than a square meter.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, so I would go back with a question to the narrative of your architecture, because I always love about the narrative architecture that it's somehow in the edge between the sculpture and the space, and as you said, everyone is interpreting it as the people want. But if I understand correctly, your concept process behind the narrative, like what you take from the story and translate into the architecture, is the emotion you find there, or you guys, or is it something else behind how the translation works?
Yeah. Good question. It's very much about a sense of emotion, and it cannot be. It's of course also irrational. So when you start in some projects, especially those who are built, it is more easy to talk about the logic than in the paper projects, because there are definitely sort of irrational leaps in the process, and I think I sketch a lot, really sort of private, not beautiful sketches, searching for a form in a way, and at some point I recognize on the paper a form that has something to do with a certain emotion, and that's from there it starts in a way. And of course that form can have a lot to do with personal biases, or there can be very many unidentified elements that inform that form. But somehow it's experienced very much as a recognition, a sort of emotional recognition of a form. And another thing which is important is that talking about emotions or idea or sort of poetry of certain narratives, some ideas can easily be worked at architecturally, and some ideas are very difficult to translate into architectural problems. So I think also because we have been working with paper projects for quite a while, and I think we always try to search for formal concepts that actually are possible to develop architecturally. So that also limits somehow the scope.
So you have something like a vocabulary of
Yeah, in a way I resist to call it a vocabulary, because that sounds too mechanical in a way, but I'm sure we have certain certain things that interest us. We are very interested in the relationship between straight and curved lines, for instance. That is, somebody would say that that is a vocabulary of us. Mm.
Okay. Thank you.
I just wanted to comment on the scope of your actually built work, because one can see really a kind of infrastructural works as fishing bridges or this water power plant and et cetera. But there are always like something, not only infrastructure, they are very much related with art, I would say. But on the other hand, it's also very sophisticated structural engineering, when I can call it like this. So my question or my comment would be, you are active as also as a teacher, so you are educating young architects. So what would be your advice? How they should actually, what should be more stressed in the process of education, like this engineering factor, or more like this, let's say, philosophical background of architecture thinking, or let's say architecture history, because it's really a kind of, we are all struggling with this. What is more important?
We are all struggling with this, and I think personally, I am not. I don't have a strong relationship to architectural history. I enjoy beautiful historic projects, but it's a very but I don't know much about neither about theory nor history, actually. So I guess I'm a maker more than a thinker. But what I am taught, my own education was very much concerned. The teachers were very concerned about, or some of the teachers were concerned about the sort of poetic capacity of structure, of constructions. And I think I'm very much influenced by that actually an architectural idea has to have a sort of constructive idea behind it, and that structure has an expressive power, not as a sort of I'm not a techno person at all, but that there is if the architectural idea can have a sort of a constructive can be linked to the constructive idea, then that gives the project power, I think. So in our, both with students and ourselves, we highly appreciate to collaborate with engineers, and we try with the students. We try to talk about how things are, how things are built.
Yes, and there is also this factor of crafting these elements, because as you shown, each of the project there was a strong experience with material and with let's say
with the process
of yeah, exactly.
Yes, and you know, it's there's so much being built today that one do not understand and do not find beautiful, or that is completely sort of alienated from the process of making, and it makes it hard to relate to. I think so. So it's very nice to have the sort of to understand what you look at when you look at the building.
Absolutely. We've been discussing with colleagues that have been part of the lecture series in previous weeks, the situation in Norwegian building industry in general and the position of architects in this industry. So if you would compare it, because as you said, you have experiences with United States and etc. or in Sweden. So if you would compare the situation of you as a Norwegian architect in your country, is it a good position? Are there many, how to say, is it difficult to persuade clients or win them for a complicated architecture works? Or
I think most architects would say yes, that is difficult in a way. You know, Norway has had an economy the last 30 years, which is extraordinary because of oil and because of so many people have so much money, and a lot of the rich people have started to invest in buildings. And they are interested in the money part of it and not the quality part of it. And I think as architects working for developers, I think it's really hard I think that's a hard position to be in, because the developers are interested in the sort of exit agenda. How much can they earn when they sell these buildings? They are much more interested in that, in owning something that has architectural quality. So I think in general it is quite hard to build in Norway, but at the same time there has been a lot of initiative by the state for projects like these tourist route projects or some other projects where there is a sort of potential for architecture, which maybe you don't find in other countries. And I think those we have been lucky. I feel that we have been lucky because we have had some of the small projects there, and we've had these sort of strange projects that are special in some way. They are not developers' projects, but it's always, most of the time it's hard to argue for your ideas.
This is the same everywhere, I would say.
Yes.
Architects have a difficult job to do.
Yeah.
I still have a very personal question, because when I went through your work, I was absolutely fascinated by what you have done with this ode to Osaka Pavilion.
Yeah.
This was something, because there is a very, how to say, I have very personal relation to Osaka, because in our country we have had each time for the expo a competition, a national competition for the pavilion, and there was a extremely interesting competition for Osaka with very experimental structures, and with Serifan it was something very similar. So this was really I was so excited when I discovered that you have done this homage. So what's the story behind it?
The story behind this is when Sverre Fehn died, the National Museum got hold of his archive, and of course Sverre Fehn has a very special position in Norway, and that Osaka competition was never built. But very many people know about the images, these inflated condoms that are being pushed around, and we were actually asked by the museum to make a model of a sort of a large model of the project, and then we were very curious about that space. And suggested that instead of making a model, they should make a one-to-one installation so that people actually could experience this breathing space. And that time it was easy to convince the client. And then we were asked to build this installation inside Sverre Fien's last project, which is the pavilion, one of the exhibition pavilions in the Architectural Museum. So we had to, we only had his competition brief, and not the brief, but competition entry, and that was, of course, a quite different project. It was much larger, it was oval, and it was never told how one actually was going to achieve the breathing structure. So we spent a lot of time sort of interpreting and figuring out how it could be done, and made this homage, because you're right, it is a homage to the project. It's not the sort of realization of the project, but I think that you know, when Fien suggested his Osaka project, it was supposed to be one was supposed to have projections of images on the surface of the textile, images of nature and industrial waste, etc. And at that time, sustainability was an unknown concept, but today sustainability is on top of the agenda for everyone. But space is a quite unknown project, or concept. So we wanted an empty pavilion where you only experience space. So that was it.
How the public perceived this? Was the public fascinated by the space?
Yes, I think they
of breathing.
Yeah, I think they had lots of visitors, and it was a very special experience to sit inside this lung and both hear and feel that it was moving. It was a very we dismantled all the electrical equipment, so it was only daylight. So the light quality inside there was beautiful. So it was a very, very special experience actually to be there.
Looking at it, I was dreaming about something like homage on not realized competition entries for the Czechoslovak pavilion. It would be
yes, that's a good idea.
Because those years it was full of these visionary and the conceptual projects. I remember the Austrian architects Hollein and Kopp Himmelblau. They have done similar structures like
yes, and it's a nice type in a way, these homages.
Thank you for explaining it. We have questions from the side of our students. So Maria.
One of our students, Christina, wrote that when you were talking about the first project, the restrooms, you mentioned several details, how they were made. Why have you decided to acknowledge them instead of hiding them as a secret treasure, as many other architects do?
Because I think that goes for almost all, or for many of our projects, that we think it's we think that showing how things are made, showing the sort of trace of the hand or the signs of the process adds to the experience of a structure. Of course, sometimes it's impossible to do it, but it's really easy to make a slick photogenic space that anyone can do that. That is the most easy thing you can do. You can just cover everything in sheetrock and paint it white, and that's it. So it's so what is hard is to actually try to solve something in a way that looks interesting or beautiful or whatever, and actually is the truth.
Thank you. If there are any other questions, please ask now.
We have very shy students.
I think that's the same everywhere.
I don't think so, because we are always complaining that the Slovak students are the most shy students in the world. But
I can assure you, I have met many shy students everywhere.
But
because we could talk to you for like all evening, but this is
yeah.
really meant for our students to sort of develop the discussion.
But
So
this is quite interesting why it is like this, that the people who actually should have so many questions that they don't have them. It's
I know, it's just important to know that it's quite okay to ask questions that do not sound very interesting or intelligent. Questions can sound very stupid and they might be very interesting.
yes, this was a very good comment. Okay, so this is the last call
chance.
for stupid questions.
But maybe there are no stupid students. It is not. I didn't mean it to come out like that, but it's true. I mean, every day when I meet clients, I ask stupid questions all the time. I think that's the way to do it.
Well, we have all our experiences in asking stupid questions.
well, but you know the saying that there is no stupid questions. There is
Exactly.
just stupid answer.
Yes, exactly.
I agree
Exactly.
to that completely.
Absolutely, it's like this. But when we are already making these jokes, etc., there is another remark I would like to make, because I was looking at the report of the European Architects Council, and there were lots of statistics.
Yeah.
And one was really very, very embarrassing for Slovakia, and it concerns women in architecture. And there was like Norway on one side, with very many women working in the architectural profession. And on the other side of the statistic, there was Slovakia and Austria, with a very, very low number of women working as architects. Do you have
Really?
an explanation for this?
But is it right? Because I when I saw people signing in for this lecture, I think I saw lots of females.
This is exactly this, let's say, discrepancy. We have half women and men as a students here at the faculty or in all educational system, but the situation changes completely when they are graduated. That like the women, they simply disappear. And we've been already like wondering with my colleagues from Austria how it is possible that exactly those two countries, Slovakia and Austria, are really on the bottom of the European situation.
But that in itself is in a way a very discouraging thing for female students to hear.
Yeah, that's
So how is the social? I mean, when you get babies and such in Slovakia, are you allowed to take time off, or
yes,
how
of
is?
course, yes.
Yes, so it's nothing about that. Maybe well, I remember when I was coming out of school, it was actually a little bit the same thing here in Norway. Lots of male officers and actually at that time few female practices, but that has changed quite a lot, and I think it just has to take its time. But maybe it's a lot. It has a lot to do with. No, it's hard to. It sounds sexist. Whatever way you try to explain it in a way, because it could be the sort of clients that do not want to deal with women, or it could be the male officers that do not trust women, or I don't know what it is. But somehow I don't believe that is the case. So no, it just have to happen by itself, I guess, or I don't know. I think it's a really difficult question to answer, or difficult.
No, I meant that. Why do you think that the situation in Norway is such a good one?
Different, yeah. That's maybe more easy.
Europe, in comparison, you are really like being a woman architect in Norway. It is a very hard situation. It looks like following the statistics, of course.
Yeah, you know, we in Norway we've had women in important positions. We have had prime minister, important female prime ministers. We have had women in positions that earlier were held by men. So I think it's sort of it's just expected somehow that women do the same things as men. But it didn't used to be like that. But during the last, I guess, 20, 30 years, that has changed. So I think it is the society that has changed. And I mean, we've had lots of good female students, and of course they need to practice because they're good. So they need to hit the market in a way. So that's a responsibility both for the discipline and for the architects themselves, that they have to take responsibility for becoming active within the discipline.
Yeah, perhaps it has something to do with self-confidence as well, and
yes,
the trust
yeah.
in
But it is a very difficult. I really don't know why. No, I think the reason why we are women in Norway is because there has, for many years, there have been 50% mix of men and women in the school, and so it's completely natural in a way that feeds into the culture. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so we have to wait for several years still, because
or to encourage, encourage and I don't know. It's hard. Of course, that has to be said that it is quite hard being an architect. So you have to have some resistance.
yeah, that's true. But anyway, well, this is what we shouldn't advertise that much, that this is hard work, because then there will be even less girls interested in it.
Yeah.
Anyway,
Feisty girls are welcome. Yes.
let's hope the situation will change. Okay, I cannot see any other written questions from the side of our students. So I would say, if there are no questions in our room here, no other questions, so then
I think the very optimistic and courageous ending was a good one for our female students, but also the male students, of course.
yeah,
Absolutely. There is at least no biological reason for a gender bias. That's for sure.
exactly. There is no excuse.
Oh.
So, dear Beate, I would like to thank you once again, because this was really very exciting, and we admire your work so much, and thank you for being with us.
It was very nice evening.
Greetings to Norway.
Yes, and greetings to all of you, and good luck.
It's really very pity that you have not been here physically, but at least
Well, some other time.
virtually. Yes, we hope so. So have a nice evening, and thank you once again.
You too. Goodbye.
Bye.
Bye.